are here today with Bonsart Bokel of the Association of Ishtar, and we're doing another part in our interview series. So let's just start off with you telling us a bit about yourself, about your writing and your YouTube channel.
I'm Bonsart Bokel from the Netherlands. I started my whole creative stuff with a blog that was called Tupperware Steampunk. Later, that became a YouTube channel called Radio Retrofuture. And one of the video series I did on there was the Steampunk Beginners Guide. And eventually, I got a lot of remarks on those videos. And that led me to create my first short stories for a series that I called the Association of Ishtar. And the idea was that people could submit their ideas, their own story ideas for this multiverse with various steampunk worlds. So yeah, that's what I've been trying to set up since then. Since I started in 2021, I've got two novels, two anthologies in ones. And now we also just finished our first comic book in our series, Journey to Elysium, which you're going to take to Kickstarter soon.
Yes. Yeah, you've done how many Kickstarters now? Because you've put
This
out a
will be the
few.
third one. Yeah,
Okay.
we just finished Bound for the Sticks. That
Mhm.
is this one.
Yes.
And yeah, the Journey of Elysium is kind of a sequel to that, as it is about the discovery of this world that is being discussed in this book. So we already got like some experience in how the world looks through this book because it's filled with illustrations as well. Yeah, now we're gonna turn that into a full comic series.
Yeah, the entire thing is such a cool project, and it's been really inspiring to me just to see how you've set all of this up. And we've talked about world building on
Mhm.
my personal channel before, and as someone who loves that sort of thing, and for, anyone watching who also does, your stuff is so in depth and it's such a interesting thing to follow. And I'm hoping that I can get involved with it at some point when I start being a
Mhm.
little less busy.
Yeah, no, I know. I really hope to have an anthology with various writers at some point, multiple
Mhm.
ideas, especially because we're also now working on an RPG based on this.
Yes.
So we're gonna have to include a lot of stuff. And well, this is the prototype of the comic.
Mm.
So it's this one is A4. The most versions are a bit smaller. Um, and yeah, what we notice really that our series is really slow paced because of how it also has to do with how I write, which is like when I write my scenes, I first really set up the stage. Like this is where the characters are. This is what the world looks like. These are the details. These are the sounds. These are the smells. And as I read more short stories, I discovered that this is often lacking in a lot of stories.
Hmm.
Like the story does not give you a sense of where you are or what the location is. It just will say, "Oh, there's a shed," and it's like, okay,
Like, yeah,
well
what does it look like? Where is
yeah,
this? Like, you're just sort of plunked into the action.
yeah, and I mean it's efficient, of course, but and I often get like commentary from reviews, like how complete it feels, and
Mhm.
that there's this sense of so much more being behind it, which is true because how I work is that I first describe everything in short stories, and then I use those short stories to work on the book. So um, and this is also where my definition of world building comes in, which is for me it's about how characters interact with the world, how they
Mhm.
experience the world. Where for most world building is the names of locations and people and all that stuff, and that's something that I work on after I finish the first draft. So
Okay. Yeah, there was I forget who talked about this, but there was a discussion about when you're creating these sort of otherworldly realms about the percentage of research and background work, and it's like a, it's like an iceberg. When you look
Hmm.
at the final result, you just get that little iceberg on top, but all that you've built under the surface is what makes it so good, that little bit that you do see. So I think that you work very much in that way.
What I do is when I start writing, and then I kind of like figure out what I come across. I guess it's what it's called discovery writing,
Mhm.
or a panzer writing by the panzer seat. But for me, having the sense that the world is real, the realism is very important.
Yeah.
So for me, I had this discussion about, why do you not use AI art, Bonsart? And I say, well, have
Oh,
you seen AI art? It all looks the same, you know.
with
Uh,
the like hands, one hand
oh,
looks like
I'm not
this.
even talking about the
Yeah.
hands, but when it
Yeah.
comes to steampunk, it's
Mhm.
all, beige clad in
Yeah.
clockwork, and that's not what my world is like at all. So,
Mhm.
here you cannot create this with 3D unless
No.
you spend like hours of investigating like how you could do something like that. Um, but yeah, so yeah, it's as an image generating tools, it's useless to me. But for
Yeah.
I'm now experimenting to use it, how to write short stories,
Hmm.
so I can use it for that.
It
Uh,
can be really useful for brainstorming. I found like
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I I use it in my writing, not for any of the, creative stuff or initial ideas, but for bouncing things off and sort of checking on things. Like it can be very useful in that way for sure.
Well, what I notice is when I'm now doing my first short story using an AI generated story, and it's like, well, I wouldn't write it like this, so I rewrite it. So
Yeah.
you're getting in a very different mode of and now I have this. Okay, what is it gonna look like? What's gonna be the motivation?
Hmm.
And here it's like, oh no, I wouldn't write it like this. Blah 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 blah. Oh, I don't like this. But so it becomes a very different, more gamified process, I guess.
Yeah, and it's interesting to talk to someone who is using that, because I know that so many people are very, afraid of it, but I'm of the mind that it can be a useful tool. And as someone who's also played around with it with my writing and scripting and stuff like that, there's a limit on it where it's at anyway now. Like there's so much that it can't do. There was one time where I took my poetry and I put the concept of it into the AI, and what it came back with was just awful. So at this point, at least, I don't see it replacing that creativity of a
No, no.
writer, but it can be incredibly helpful, and not at least giving it a try is kind of, cutting your nose off to spite your face, because it can be really great for productivity, especially when you're working in massive worlds like that.
Mhm. Well, I mean, it's impossible. So far as I can see, AI cannot write high concept as I
Mhm.
do. So
Yeah,
that's already a limit. I mean, most writers these days can't write high concept.
true.
I mean that's why you get like Star Trek is now basically indistinguishable from Star Wars at this point.
Yeah.
And um, that's one problem, because everyone is so all the booktubers are so hype focused on the hero's journey, because
Mhm.
that's easy to explain.
Yeah.
But then high concepts, that's there's barely anyone who talks about that.
Hmm.
Reviewers sometimes talk about it, but then
Yeah.
it's like, well, high concepts is basically what if. And I mean, yes, that's correct, but that's only the beginning. That's not how it works. And that's why I was so happy with Cyberpunk Edge Runners, because it's such a wonderful. It's how high concept should be written.
Okay.
Like, and Blade Runner is for me also still the example of how to
Yeah.
write high
Oh,
concepts.
so good. Yeah.
Yes.
And I
And I,
on my channel, like I've done a lot of the basics, right? And I spent a lot of time doing that and with archetypes in the hero's journey, because it's a good basic thing for people to know when they're
yeah, it's
starting
easy
out
to
writing.
explain.
But
Yeah.
yeah, and it's a nice way to start. And also things like, save the cat. I've used that a lot for outlining, and these are good places to start. But now that I'm getting into my
Right.
bigger
Yeah.
works, I'm trying to expand that and also take my channel along with it, which is why I haven't posted videos in a long time, because now it's turning into, all right, how am I going to take these higher concept things and these bigger projects and bring it in and take it to the next level. So I do hope to see more of that around book and author tube, because we've kind of rehashed the same thing over and over again at this
Yeah.
point.
I
And
mean,
I found myself looking at my channel and I was like, I've seen this a million other places. I got to switch it up.
yeah. Well, I mean, this is why these are so interesting. These are the
Mhm.
anthologies, which are
Yeah.
literally files, which are
Yeah, I love
you
that
know,
idea.
for the viewers back home who don't know how these stories are. They're literally files, and they're like high concept stories. They don't follow a traditional storytelling structure, because it's about exploration. It's about
Mhm.
for me, a good high concept story, you're driving around the road, you have a clear destination on your vacation, like you're going to some pool place or something. But on the road, you start seeing like these castle ruins or these big, beautiful mountains where there is some weird structure that, like, what is that? And that is what good high concept does, where
Mhm.
you have a clear road ahead, but then you see all these things on the side. Like, how does that work? And Cyberpunk Edge Runners does that very well, where it has like all these strange things. It doesn't explain it, but you understand what it does in terms of the story.
I'm gonna
But
have
it's
to look
like,
into that.
yeah, well, why are they doing things like that? Or so many things, and that's good high concept
Yeah.
story. Like you're seeing all these things to the side, and that's what I like about my latest book, Bound for the Sticks. Like I said, it's based on all the short stories.
Yeah.
The things that appear in this book, but they're not explained.
Hmm.
If you want the explanation, you really have to get this anthology, which is the Arcology Companion,
Hmm.
which is really, well, a companion to the book. And the response to it, like, from, oh, I saw all these weird things that I thought were cool in the book, and then I read the Arcology Companion, then I read how screwed up they are. uh so
That's cool.
yeah.
So, speaking of, short stories and also the sticks, what inspired you to contribute your work to the Stygian collection?
Well, you wrote me,
I did.
and it was like, okay, well, I don't have time for this. But then I recalled that, yeah, I was still finishing up Bound for the Sticks at that time. Um,
Which was kind of an
and
interesting thing because we had Stygian and Styx right alongside each other.
yeah,
So I thought that was
yeah,
kind of cool.
yeah, and but I before that I wrote a short story that was more traditional, middle, beginning, and end story.
Mm.
That was kind of written as an introduction to the Association of Ishtar, for people. Okay, like, this is the kind of adventures you can have as an associate, or kind of like that. And yeah, that was like, okay, well, that sounds suitable. Would you be interested in that? And that's basically that was basically my contribution right there.
Yeah, it's a great piece too because it very much stands out because we have another creator in the anthology who's interested in steampunk stuff and that sort of world, but he went in a very different direction. So your story winds up being like quite different, but I really loved it, and I loved your use of sound effects and stuff because it's very
Yeah.
different from other thing. Like you were saying about bringing in those elements that you don't always see in stories. I think it's a
Mhm.
great example and a great introduction to your other work.
Yeah, it's something that I really should give workshops again. But it's one of the things that I also emphasize in workshops, and I also wrote this little introduction, like, okay, how do you do proper show don't tell? And I have this segment about a factory, and it's funny how people react to writing in that regard, where you put in a particular line to kind of like symbolize the whole situation. And
Hmm.
that is, then you've got the people who really like the fact that I included the sounds that are reverberating through the character's body and
Yeah.
through the floor. So there's no escaping, the violence that is going on in that factory. And then there are people who are really abstract, who really like the final sentence that she felt like an ant at the foot of a boot. Mm-hmm. Poorly recited there, but so it's really funny that you're, for me, that there's like these people that are really attracted to my visual storytelling. It's also one of the reasons why my books are pretty easily translatable into comics, because I write my sentences as comic book panels. Mm-hmm. And it also going over that. Anyway, the abstract use of language is, is another type of person. So that's the contradiction between people who have strong left brain development and strong right brain development.
And it's interesting you mentioned comics, because I have a comic background. So whenever I'm writing, that's like, my dad works with Marvel and DC, so I grew up in conventions and seeing that art form, every day, all the time, up on his computer coloring. So when I write, I'm very much thinking in that way, in that format. It always comes to me in images. So that's probably why when I read your work, it's really, it's connecting with me in that same way, because it's a similar language.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily even by intent, but that's how I realized. It's funny, because my first comic, this is Bonsart learning how to write a comic, like 5-6 pages. And it's very interesting, because you're starting to really look differently at how you structure sentences and structure scenes when you write comics. So I would highly recommend writers who never done this before, because this is also apparently a secret. Go figure. It's like comic book writers and normal writers apparently do not talk to each other. Yeah. And there are a lot of like professional writers who were like really surprised, like, really, you can write sentences like comic book panels? Yes, you can. And if you want my secret, I wrote a blog that's called How to Write a Sentence, where I go over that.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
And I find that there's a lot of separation, maybe a bit less so these days, but there has been sort of that stigma of comic books not being like real writing and stuff like that. I remember running into a lot of that with more long form writers, and thankfully there's been some evolution that comic books are being more respected these days, because there's a lot that go into them, and it's a great way to learn how to be really concise and visual in your writing and plot. It is very valuable to try writing in that form.
And especially scene construction, that's what I notice. That because now I'm converting. Like, now these are very old stories of mine, and they're not representative of my current style. It's more of an evolutionary thing, but it already had kind of like that visual stuff. So when I wrote my first issue, there was definitely this, if I put it this way, this is a comic book panel, this is a comic book panel, this is a comic book panel. So, but then there was also like moments like, this should be up higher up in the story. And that's kind of like what I talk about when I say setting up the stage properly. So that it's definitely very interesting to see that. And was I going anywhere with this? No, that might have been.
I think we were just talking about how valuable it is to explore that form as a writer, and how it can really help you. I agree.
Yeah, but this is like the secret that a lot of I remember where I was going with this. The secret to writing a comic book panel is that one sentence is what one comic book panel. That's basically the golden rule for comic book writers.
Yeah.
When I heard that, like, it sounded like so logical, and then that's kind of like how I'm trying to write my sentences now. And then I talked to one of the guests on my show. She's also Dutch, and she happened to be in the Netherlands at the time. And then we spoke here in my apartment. And there she also complained about, like, she's an illustrator, but she also had a background in printing.
Okay.
And she says, these days, like, people like me are so rare. If you've got illustrators and you've got the printers, and they don't know anything about each other.
Yeah, it's true. It's very disconnected.
Yeah.
My
So
dad actually worked doing proper like classic printing before he got into comics when he was younger. So he has that background, and he's talked to me about it. And when I was in Winnipeg, where I'm from, and where he still is, we would always go to the actual printer when we were getting his
mhm,
comics printed, so that we could
yeah.
watch it and he could sign everything, and you could see the whole process of what's going on. And it's very fascinating. And I think it's another thing that's good to see for
Yeah, well,
yourself.
we're looking at this, and this is above expectation for me. What I've got in my hands, but see, like, looked at it and said, "Ah, this shit."
Yeah, that will happen.
So we don't know the possibilities, and that's
Mhm.
like, and then I am now looking into making a special edition of this, and it also will have a different cover. It will be hardcover, and it will have this frame around the picture as well. And it would be like, oh man, if we could like make that silver and stuff, that would be awesome for a special edition. But you don't know the options, or how
Yeah,
it goes, or where to go to.
that
I think there's a specialty printer in the United States who does that type of thing, but
they're around, because I'm exploring that same sort of thing right now, because we want to put out a special edition of the Stygian Collection for
mm,
Halloween, ideally. And so for me, like, I formatted the whole book, and there are definitely concerns I have with it that I would want to change, and I want to research that more. And my friend does formatting, so I'm likely going to get her to do it next time, because she knows how to do that, and I just want to tweak it and make it as good as possible. And we were able to find a book bindery in Montreal who
mm.
they'll do the embossing and leatherette and
Oh,
everything like
awesome.
that
Yeah.
for to be that classic kind of look. So we're going to be able to go directly there, because it's in the same city, see the whole process, talk to them, and be very visual and tactile with the
Yeah,
whole
exactly. That's what I
experience.
would like to
So
have. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I'm sure they're around. Like, if you just sort of look for binderies, there's got to be something in your
Yeah.
area, because they're indie ones. And it took someone recommending this one to me for me to find out about it. So
Yeah. It's when I ask like Dutch comic book publishers,
mhm.
they often tell me to tell me about the American ones.
Yeah,
So, but I'm like a lot of Americans are amazed, like, but I can get made locally, like patches
mhm.
and stickers and all that stuff. So, we should have that as well.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, that's also something that I'm working on. Like, I already know how to get patches, and
yeah.
all that stuff, and how to get the stickers and all that. It's really the novelty stuff that I'm really like, okay, how to do that.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's so great when you can find your source for that, because then you're just off and running. And once you have
mhm.
all your places where everything's getting made properly, it's so easy to have your art flourish more. So I'm
Yeah,
definitely in that hunting phase too.
yeah, and I recently got my stuff on Ingram Sparks, which
That's
is now.
I'm looking into that right now too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's I mean, it's a very similar approach to Amazon. Just that for I still need to order proof copies to see how they turned out exactly. But for comics, it's a bit harder because Amazon has this beautiful system where you see like the left side and the right side like
Yeah.
on one page. Ingram Sparks does not do that.
Okay.
So it's just a PDF and everything is like underneath each other. So it's like, okay,
Right.
and then you're like, oh, well, like they have an explanation like how it will look, but it's not, without that visual confirmation, it just
Hmm.
feels like a bit. So I'm very curious. I need to order it, and they also apparently use thinner paper.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
so
Our account is getting approved right now, because one of the things I had issues with Amazon. I really don't like that they don't let you order your author copies before the book is published. So, we had a
oh
lot
yeah,
of
no, that's correct. Yeah,
delays.
only proof
Yeah.
copies. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was not a fan of that. So my main thing is finding a place. Like, I still want things to be available on Amazon, but I want a place that will let me have more control over my own
Mhm.
work. Because I found myself in so many arguments with them just being like, this is my thing though. You should send me copies. And they're like, nope, just proofs.
Yeah.
It was a pain. So anything I can do to fix that will be good. Um,
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to roam in that
yeah.
regard. You just have no idea, especially not as a starting out publisher. And
Hmm.
a lot of like I'm now on Ream Stories. That's a whole new website, which kind of like a Patreon specialized for
Okay.
indie authors.
Oh, cool.
Um, yeah, I can send you a referral link.
Yeah, that'd
But
be great.
I love it because instead of uploading PDFs or every posting every week or scheduling everything manual. What Ream Story does is you upload your novel or book in a Google Drive document,
Mhm.
and it just does everything for you automatically. It then says,
Okay.
okay, in what period of time do you want to upload a new chapter? It's like, well, 2 weeks, 1 week, doesn't
That's
matter.
great.
It automatically schedules everything for you. And
Cool.
I actually had a conversation with the CEO of that company. He's himself a cyberpunk writer, so
Mhm.
we were geeking out about cyberpunk all the time during the
Nice.
conversation. Um, but yeah, no, it's wonderful. I have 2 whole backers on it right now, so
Ah,
I hope to grow that. And they're still rolling out new things. Now they
okay.
also have like a follower button because at first when you land on my page, you immediately saw all my paid tiers, but I actually have free content on there as well,
Mm. Okay.
which is now public weekly. Um, and then you can become a $0 follower, and then you just get posts of like, oh, now he uploaded a new story, and
Hmm.
the some paid tiers get like my stuff early, and the highest tiers also get like the first draft, so they can comment on it, and you can give comments on stuff per line.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll have
yeah,
to look
it's
into that because I recently shut down my Patreon because I just wasn't, well, first I didn't have enough time to put stuff on it, but it's something I want to explore again and also explore with
yeah.
Stygian. So
Mhm. Well,
that'll
Ream
be good to look
Stories would
into.
be a great
Hmm.
opportunity because then it's just like, okay, I'm gonna upload the whole anthology every week.
Yeah.
You get, somebody with this tier gets them right away. Somebody with this tier gets them like every 2 weeks,
Hmm.
and so
Cool.
on. Yeah.
So with Stygian, we haven't really talked much about your story. So
Mhm.
do you want to talk about it a little bit without
Oh
giving
yeah,
any
sure.
spoilers?
Sure, go ahead. I don't know where to start with it, but so yeah, but please ask me questions about it. That would probably be
Oh, well, if you just want to sort of give a, like the summary, summary of what's going on in this piece.
how to summarize it.
Yeah.
My intention was to write an introduction for people who are new to the Association of Ishtar, of what an Associate of Ishtar is and what they're doing.
Mhm.
So it's basically an associate going on a mission for the first time with a senior associate who tells him what it happens. Though it goes a lot in the details of how what that first experience is like and what they encounter, and that lands them at an old chateau of whom the owner recently died. She lived there all alone. She was the only inhabitant in that village. A matter of fact, there are a lot of villages in France like that still to this day.
Oh, well.
Yeah. No, there's like entire villages that have no more inhabitants.
Mhm.
Maybe there's like some elderly person. The story that about her dying on the way doing groceries to the nearby village. That those things are pretty normal over there.
Okay.
So yeah, it's just a particular way of life. It's the reason why the deja vu was invented. For exactly that type of communities. And for those who don't know, deja vu is a type of French car. I think it's from Citroën,
Okay.
which could be fixed by the local blacksmith.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't
That's the
heard of
whole
that. That's
idea
really cool.
behind the deja vu. That's why they're indestructible. Like there's nothing that can go broke because there's literally nothing on it. They
Okay.
also call them ugly ducklings
Okay.
because of their peculiar shape.
I'm gonna have to look that up after.
Yeah. They're actually popular in countries like India and stuff. And then there's like these complete, entirely modded versions of it because they're so easy customizable into
Mhm.
these absolute abominations.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, it's deja vu. And yeah, so that's like a little bit of the background on the human side, but it turns out there is a rift underneath it, and now we're already going into spoiler territories. That's the
Yes,
problem
yes.
when writing mystery novels,
And short stories, you really want to like that. It's so short, it's easy to spoil.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so how would you describe an associate then? Like, how would you describe their role?
Oof. Well, there's an entire philosophy behind it,
Yeah.
actually. But they're like inspired by all pulp heroes, in particular the Shadow.
Oh yeah.
They're not so much heroes as they are Avengers.
Mhm.
And in this particular world, which is the politics behind it is very important. Like they have a particular niche that they've monopolized for themselves in in what is kind of like ironically called the rift related community.
Mhm.
As on this world, all these rifts to other planes of existence are opening up, and these are two-way portals, so they can go through them, but other things can come out of them as well. And the Association of Ishtar was like one of the first groups to investigate this, and that kind of led them into a very protective direction, shall we say. And they are vowing to protect the world from the effects of these rifts. But the problem is, it's not just monsters coming through there; it's ideas from futuristic societies as well, and religions and all that stuff. So what's going on is there's this entire complex realm of politics around it. As you know, you've got like the force of the 19th century that are trying to maintain the balance of power. Meanwhile, they also want to get all this technology. There's a corporation called Uther Crab, which is who expanded thanks to this type of reverse engineering. However, it also means that they're like on a resource craze because they need to like all these logistics that we are familiar with do not exist. That all still needs to be created. So
Mhm.
much of the technology is limited by the fact that they just cannot logistically manage the whole thing, which is very topical in regards to our present world, which microchips, everyone thinks, oh, microchips, oh well, everyone can make microchips,
Yeah.
but no, it's like literally 3 places in the world, one of which is the Netherlands. And if Netherlands would say, oh, we're not doing it anymore, then the whole microchip industry would
And
collapse.
there's been issues with that in recent
Yeah.
years too, with
Yeah.
shortages and stuff.
Well, but people are now becoming aware of it
Yeah.
and what it really means. And it turns out that, this little thing by Philips that once discarded this a section of their company. Uh, I wonder what consequences for the guy who did that was.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they built these machines, and they're the only ones who are doing it.
Mhm.
And that's why China wants to get into that. And they're saying, well, they
Yeah.
can try, but in 10 years they will not have succeeded. So I
Mhm.
mean, the same thing killed the Soviet Union. In matter of fact, they also tried making microchips and then utterly
Mhm.
failed. So every time the Westerners bought electronic equipment from Soviet Union, it's like, okay, what microchips did they steal from us this time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it were all like poor copies, and China is doing the same right now.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that's a very important component of the world building of the Association of Ishtar
Okay.
and that type of stuff. And yeah, the association is not in favor of this, but they also know that they cannot prevent it. So there's
Mhm.
like I wrote two particular short stories. One of them is about wireless power, where there is this company, an entrepreneur that approaches them voluntarily. Like, I've got this wireless power. We got this through these and these channels, and the association agrees with it. But because there's it's part of a greater plan that is yet to be revealed. But
Okay.
there's also this medicine which is designated P25. Everything has either a C, S, or P number.
Mm.
And P25 is a vaccine against cancer.
Okay.
Yeah. And the association has threatened to destroy every organization that condones its proliferation.
Oh.
Including RA, which is the International Committee of Rift-Related Activities, who they work in association with. And the reason for that is that it uses alien plant life in its creation.
Okay.
And the association does not want alien plant life being cultivated on their world.
Right.
So,
but curing cancer.
Yes, exactly.
That's very cool. Like I just love the depth of this. So I like it, and I always appreciate when an author can just go on about their world and like talk about so much detail. And it's what I know, like I genuinely love it. And I wish that I hope to do that with my fantasy worlds at some point, to know them so well and to know all those politics and backgrounds. And I think that anyone who's looking to write in that way should really be following the work that you do, because it's very inspirational.
Well, it's all on sale, so including on my own website, and of course we're doing the Kickstarter where all my books will also be on sale, and you'll be supporting the project overall. I mean, this basically was paid for by my last Kickstarter for Bound of the Sticks, and I'm working with a lot of illustrators where all of the money goes. So you're not necessarily supporting me or supporting my illustrators when it comes down to it.
That was mainly what our Kickstarter was for as well, just to get that that level of art that we wanted in the book, and that that aesthetic.
Yeah, and the next book is going to be Anwin, and Johan, my main illustrator, is now working on making all these pictures about a living doll.
Cool.
Yeah, some of them are really sad. Like the first one is literally her being trapped in a cage, trying to get out. Yeah. But I think why the Association of Ishtar works and why things like it works is because it keeps many of the problems in the realm of the human. Like, it's a strange idea, vaccine for cancer, but everyone would understand what that means. It's a fantastical concept, but the consequences are very real. And I think that's a lot of the problem with a lot of fantasy stuff, where they just take every crazy idea and it's like, okay, but and every time anyone starts with time travel aliens, I'm like, why is the time travel necessary?
It's like, you need to still be able to relate on that human level. You need to be able to make that connection. You need something
why
in
do
there.
People care about the question, if you could time travel, would you kill baby Hitler? And I'm like, why Hitler? Why not Stalin? But anyway, but we understand the question, right? That's something that is for us like, okay, we know what these men represent and what they did and what they caused, but I mean, the interesting question, and especially for someone who has an historical background like myself, like, would this really be a better ending? Because those guys didn't still exist, and they might even be more dangerous if Hitler wasn't there. So
it's like the butterfly effect. Like that was bad, but what other bad did we avoid by having that one? And
I was just watching a video by somebody, and he said, history does not care about your preconceptions. And then that's unfortunately a big problem of how a lot of people talk about history these days.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
And for me, because I also talk about in The Range and the Machine, the first book, I also talk about the slave trade, and particularly the parts that few people know about, even though it's I think I told you once about the West Africa Squadron.
I think so, yeah.
So they were the anti-slavery patrols that basically destroyed the transatlantic slave trade. And the British paid for that war debt up till 2014 from the top of my head. So if you were a British taxpayer before 2014, you literally paid for the ending of the slave trade, or rather the transatlantic slave trade. Yeah. people have no bloody idea what they're
No,
what
like there's a lot of without getting too much into it, there's a lot of buzz topics these days that I think
yeah,
people
yeah.
discuss without really knowing anything about
Oh yeah.
them. And I think if you're going to discuss history and politics, and you need to have a background in it. You can't
Hmm.
just sort of jump in and be like, yeah, this is my opinion on it
Now
when
that's
you
where my
don't know the
research comes
background.
in.
And yeah, yeah,
I wanted
people
to.
need to do more research in these areas.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to, well, I recently had somebody commenting on one of my videos, and she wanted to talk about the nasty history of the colonization, and then
Mm,
she had this very simplistic, oh, it's the oppressors rising up against the oppressor, and like, okay, but do you realize how complex this is? It's
it's a
not.
very nuanced
Yeah,
topic.
I mean, I talked with this my illustrator Johan. He's from Indonesia, where the Dutch Indian period was like a period that was literally not talked about.
Mm.
Indonesia under Suharto. You were not allowed to discuss it, and now they're reevaluating that period, and they're trying now to carefully bring back the type of colonial architecture because it was well superior to what they currently have at the moment,
Mm.
and at the time, because it's Western architecture applied for that particular type of climate. So,
Right.
and his uncle actually wrote a book on. There's this Dutch architect who's very famous, called Berlage, and he also designed Indonesian buildings. And now he's working on a book about that architect and what he
Oh,
designed both in the Netherlands and in Indonesia. Yeah.
that's fascinating.
And then also something that I want to talk about, and that's probably going to come back in my comic book series as well, is that Indonesia and the Netherlands, they had a radio network that connected each other.
Mm.
That's unique.
Hmm.
And there's this building. It looks amazing. It's like it would be ideal for your bad German person book. You're not allowed to use those words anymore on YouTube.
Yes, yes.
But it looks like this really dark, brutalist architecture. But
Okay.
no, it's a Dutch architect. It's completely made of concrete because they weren't allowed to use metal in it because it's a radio tower.
Okay.
And it's like and the Germans tried to use it during the Second World War, but apparently it was sabotaged by the engineers. So the radio signals, because it bounces off the atmosphere,
Hmm.
and the engineers screwed with the coordinates. So
Okay.
so it was sending signals to the wrong place. But yeah, there was also the radio station. The other side of this system is still standing in Indonesia as well, which is, I think, it is completely made of bamboo. Um, yeah, because again, they weren't allowed to use metal. So, but
There's
but
so much I'm gonna have to look up after this conversation.
well, I mean, something I wanted to mention is, when I read a story, I want to come back with the feeling that I've learned something
Hmm.
new.
Hmm.
That's why high concept is so interesting for me. Either it gives me an idea, something to explore, or something like, oh, I did not know that. And
Yeah.
that's also a reaction that I get from a lot of people. Like in the book Bound for the Sticks, we use the word tatak, which is it's an Indonesian slur,
Mm.
but it's some people believe it's a slur for foreigners,
Okay.
or the Dutch, but no, it was a slur for a particular type of colonial. And one of the stories that my grandmother always told me, she's from the Dutch Indies. She's also been to the camps and all that stuff. And matter of fact, that I have a casket over there. That was all they had when they came here. Um, but they would describe a Tatak as a person. One of the tropes of a Tatak was that they always carried applesauce.
Okay.
Yes, and well, what they would do, they did not like Indonesian food, so what they would do, they would take the applesauce and pour it over the food.
Just ruin it.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
but that was like a trick that parents used over here, that they would
Okay.
like add applesauce to everything, the children didn't want to eat.
I mean, I do like
So they
applesauce.
Yeah, so they added applesauce, and that's something that Tatars still did. That was
Okay.
like one of the things. So you had like the Indos. Now Indo is also for my mother that was a slur because that were like the half-bloods.
Okay.
Yeah, so but a lot of people call the Dutch colonials Indos, so that really frustrated colonials because they were when I came, I once did a poll. I went house by house in Rotterdam, and sometimes, especially the older people, because they're lonely, they want to talk, and they
Yeah.
invite you into their house, and so you
Yeah.
kind of become like a civil, anyway, social worker. And then one guy, he said like, you're not from here, are you? And said, well, well, my mother was from the Dutch India. The first thing he said was, oh, they were treated like trash.
Mm.
First thing he said. And yeah, that was a real thing. And I actually wrote a story about that as well. It's called the Tether, inspired by the radio signals, by the way.
Okay.
I have not published it. It's on my website somewhere. But it was funny for Johan because I showed him the story. I actually wrote a story about Indonesia, which was about the perspective of a colonial and how he saw his place in the world. And one thing he believed that with the rifts he could go from Indonesia to the Netherlands.
Oh yeah.
That is, but instead, when it comes to Dutch colonials, there is something that they call the silent force. You're not even allowed to mention that word, and the silent force, and that is something that my mother, my grandmother, they all believed in it.
Okay.
And it's there's a lot of superstition in my family, and it's scary. It really is because my grandmother talked about things that she had experienced while in Indonesia, and it's creepy stuff.
Oh well,
And
we should do a separate discussion on all of that sometime.
we can do that.
That'd be
And
great. I mean, if you're open to sharing it.
oh yeah, sure. But the thing is like that. In this story, it's probably one of the more cosmic horror-esque stories of the series, where this guy gets possessed by some type of force, where he loses his connection with other humans.
Okay.
But it's not visible. It's just something. Just people just don't want to be in contact with him anymore. And one morning he finds like all his servants are gone, and there's like salt in front of the door.
Okay. It's always a sign.
Yeah. And that type of stuff. And he really starts to like doubt his own humanity because no one wants to have anything to do with him. And it's not something that's visible, and that's probably the worst aspect about it. That imagine being close to somebody and you just can't stand being with that person for some weird reason.
It's an interesting concept.
Yeah. So yeah, and it ends that he basically cuts the safety line and walks into the rift, never to be seen again.
I want to read that.
Yeah, in hunt of whatever it is that believes that is the cause of his misery.
Okay.
But
yeah. It's so in my first interview with Margaret, this came up where she likes delving into lesser known elements of history. So I'm finding this connection, and it leads into my last question as we wrap this up is just, as I'm looking at this anthology, I'm noticing things that we have in common. And I mean, all of the writers, there's lots of differences, but there's a lot of commonalities. And we've sort of been building this little Stygian community. And you're someone who works very much in community. So looking at the anthology, looking at what we're building, what are your hopes and expectations for how this moves forward, how this collaboration continues?
Well, I have not looked that deeply into the community as of yet. Like as somebody who's starting out as an independent creator, what I noticed for what has been very helpful for me is contacts. That people tell you where to look for information or things, or just tell you how to quickly do things. Just being able to ask questions to anyone on how to do Kickstarters, give feedback on Kickstarters.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff has helped me immensely. We did the Kickstarter together, where you sold my books, I sold yours.
Hmm.
I want to do something like that for my next Kickstarter,
Yeah.
if possible, for comics, because I don't know if books are a good match for that. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Um,
So yeah, that contact element, and and then with the anthology and everything, what are you hoping to see come of that as it goes forward too?
Phew. Well, more anthologies, I suppose.
Hmm.
That is something that needs to be kept up, and yeah, who knows? Like for me, no, I have a very clear goal that I want like a shared universe. That is my goal. I don't know. Does the Stygian collection have any ambitions like that?
So I personally do in my work, which will be coming out through Stygian Society. With anthologies, pretty much everyone I've spoken to one-on-one has expressed doing more anthologies, but we're just, it's about brainstorming how we want the next ones to go, because obviously they wouldn't be exactly the same as just, the general Stygian concept, because this was very much
Mhm.
a introduction, right, to our company and our goals. So it could be something that becomes more of a cohesive world, and the stories are more connected to one another in the future. It's definitely something we'd consider. I think that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, right. So
All right. So,
now I'm taking more the role of the interviewer, so I'm
oh,
getting it.
that's fine. There's back and forth. But to wrap it up, how about you tell us? I mean, you've talked about it a bit already. Just tell us, one by one, what are you working on now? Where can everyone find your work? Where can they read all of your stories, and how can they get involved?
For general information and blogs on writing, www.associationofishtar.com. I still have short stories on there as well, but I want to move those to Ream Stories dash Bonsart dash Public, I think it is. So that's where I'll be posting most of the fiction work and also the paid work. So you can pay a couple of bucks a month, and then you get like access to the latest novels, and previews of our upcoming novels as well. Enwin, which is about a doll that comes to life, is nearly done. Johan is working on the illustrations. It's going to be really cute and adorable and scary at the same time, because you've
The
got a
best.
doll chasing a young woman around. This is already available, but you want a special edition on Kickstarter. Um, and that's maybe this version will also be expanded. I don't know yet how we're gonna exactly do that, but we're also gonna have patches. We're gonna have all the books on there as well. And we're gonna have a hardcover edition, at least maybe even a bit more luxurious. And depending on the amount of money that we bring in, it might also have like additional lore related pages, more art of, for example, the airborne dragoons that appear in there. And let's see, I finished the draft of the Casket Girls, which is my first military steampunk, also
Mhm.
set in the same universe, which is people who love things like Warhammer 40k and BattleTech will love. Um, I'm working on a lot more, including a role playing game, but it's too
Nice.
early to say anything about that. But
I'm really excited to see how that goes.
I people can always submit story ideas and concepts. We have a two-step submission program now. I hope that at some point also takes off, because I would love to see other people's takes on the universe and stuff that we can include. So
Yeah.
people are also free to make costumes based on it, which some are already doing. So
I've seen some of that. It's really, really great to see. As someone with the comic background, my sort of goal is always to take my work to conventions and have some cosplayers show up. I think it's
mhm.
really fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've got a lot of really exciting stuff going on. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. I think it was an interesting conversation, and people should get a lot out of it. And I know they're going to be encouraged to go and follow your work for sure. But I will give you back the rest of your evening, and I will, of course, put all your links in the description down below, so you can send me anything, and we'll show it off for people to follow.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you so much, and
Yes.
I'll talk to you again soon.
Yes. Good day.